Welcome back to the One Oat Podcast. Today we have a topic that's significant for both our personal and professional development: emotional intelligence, or EQ. We'll dive deep into how managing our own emotions and empathizing with others can shape not just our well being, but our relationships, careers, and personal growth. I am Brawin, your host, and as always, our youth empowerment advocate Liza is joining me. Welcome back, Liza.
Thank you, Brawin. This is one of those topics that I'm always excited to discuss because emotional intelligence affects every aspect of our lives, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely. When people hear emotional intelligence, I think they tend to focus on just one part, usually managing their own emotions. But EQ is so much broader, right? It also involves understanding and empathizing with the emotions of others. Let's start with that first piece, managing our own emotions. What does it mean to be emotionally intelligent in this context, Lisa?
When we talk about managing our own emotions, we are really talking about self-awareness and self-regulation. It's about understanding what you are feeling in the moment, as well as why you are feeling it, and then deciding how you want to respond. And this is a skill, like a muscle that you can train over time. Think about situations when you are stressed, angry, or even overly excited. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean suppressing those feelings. It's about acknowledging them and finding productive ways to express or channel them.
That's such an important distinction, especially in today's fast-paced world where stress can build up easily. I think many of us, especially young people, are constantly bombarded with emotions, whether it's from social media, school, or work. How do you see that affecting their ability to manage emotions?
You're right, there's so much pressure from all sides, like trying to keep up with social expectations, handling personal issues, and dealing with uncertainty about the future. This is a lot. This emotional overload can lead to burnout, anxiety, or even emotional outbursts. But one of the biggest things I've noticed in today's youth is that many people don't have the tools to process these feelings. They have a lot of complex emotions, but they don't know how to manage them in a healthy way. Emotional intelligence gives us the tools to slow down and ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? And how can I address this without letting it overwhelm me?
Exactly, it's about taking a pause and having that internal conversation with yourself. Now, when it comes to the second piece, empathizing with others, I feel this is where a lot of magic happens in relationships, both personal and professional. But it's also where many of us struggle. Can you talk a little bit about what empathy looks like in emotional intelligence?
Empathy is one of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence. It is the ability not to just understand someone else's emotions, but to truly feel what they are going through from their perspective. It is about putting yourself in their shoes, even if their experiences or feelings are different from your own. When we can empathize with others, it builds deeper connections, strengthens trust, and improves communication. But empathy isn't always easy, especially if we are wrapped up in our own stress or biases. This is why developing empathy also requires emotional awareness. It helps us pause our own reactions long enough to genuinely listen to someone else.
That's so true. I think empathy is often confused with sympathy, feeling sorry for someone, when it's about connecting on a much deeper level. Can you share an example, maybe from your work, where empathy made a huge difference in how situation was handled?
Sure, I once worked with a young person who was going through a lot of challenges at home and was acting out at school. On the surface, it was easy for teachers to label him as the problem. But when we took the time to sit with him and really listen, asking him questions like, "How are you feeling today?" we uncovered that his outbursts were really cries for help. He felt misunderstood. By showing empathy, by validating his emotions and letting him know we were there to support rather than judge him, his behavior started to change. He felt seen, heard, and cared for. This is the power of empathy, you know. It opens the door for healing and growth.
That is so powerful. It makes me think about how many conflicts, whether at work, in friendship, or even families, could be resolved if we just took a moment to emphasize instead of reacting. But you mentioned something important there: listening. I feel like active listening is often underestimated in conversation about emotional intelligence. What role does listening play in empathy?
Listening is an essential part of empathy. We often think of conversations as opportunities to respond, but true empathy involves listening without planning your next move. It's about being fully present, picking up on both spoken and unspoken cues, and responding in a way that shows you have really heard the other person. When we are genuinely listening, we are not just absorbing words, we are tuning into the emotions beneath those words. This is how we can truly connect with others.
I love that. It reminds me of difference between hearing and listening. Anyone can hear words, but not everyone listens with the intent to understand. Now, when it comes to managing our emotions and empathizing with others, what are some practical strategies that people, especially young people, can use to train their emotional intelligence?
This is a great question. For managing your own emotions, I would say the first step is mindfulness. It's about learning to recognize your emotional triggers before they take control of you. You can practice mindfulness through techniques like deep breathing, journalizing, or even just taking a moment of silence. Those simple techniques can help you gain control over your emotional reactions. For empathy, one of the best practices is asking open-ended questions. Instead of assuming what someone else is feeling, get curious. Questions like, how did that make you feel? Or, what's going on in your mind? Can open up space for deeper understanding.
I really appreciate those suggestions. Mindfulness is something anyone can start practicing right now, and asking open-ended questions encourages conversation and connection. Before we wrap up, I want to touch one final point: how emotional intelligence affects leadership. We often talk about EQ in the context of personal relationships, but what is its role in leadership's role?
Emotional intelligence is crucial in leadership. Leaders with high emotional intelligence can manage their own stress and emotions, which helps them to create a more positive environment for their teams. But even more importantly, they lead with empathy. They understand their team members' strengths, challenges, and emotions, which helps to motivate and support them effectively. Leaders who can empathize with their employees build trust, reduce conflict, and foster an environment where people feel safe and valued. And that's not just good for morale, it's good for productivity and innovation too.
That's such an important takeaway. Whether you are leading a team or just navigating life's challenges, emotional intelligence is a skill that makes all the difference. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your insight today. Emotional intelligence isn't something we often learn at school, but it's probably one of the most important skills we can develop. Do you have any final thought for our listeners?
Just that emotional intelligence is not a trait that you either have or you don't. It is something that you can actively work on, whether it is through practicing mindfulness, listening more intently, or showing empathy for others. Each step you take trains your EQ, and the benefits ripple through every part of your life. So keep investing in your emotional well-being and in understanding others. It is one of the best investments you can make.
Well said. And to our listeners, remember, emotional intelligence is about progress, not perfection. Every little bit helps. Thank you for tuning into the One Oat Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to reflect on how you are managing your emotions and empathizing with those around you. Until next time.